talking about some of the positive changes that transpired this last legislative session. CVIC worked to support House Bill 1269, which will have a lasting impact on many victims of domestic violence throughout the state. And we're actually with Representative Ista here today, as well as Taylor from our New Choices program, our domestic violence intervention program. And maybe we'll just jump right into it. You were the main author of 1269, as well as several others of the 900 that hit the floor this session. Can you just explain what changes this bill will mean for domestic violence intervention?
Right. We've had on the books in North Dakota for some time a law that says if a person is convicted of certain crimes and the victim of those was a family or household member, the judge must sentence that person to intervention programming to try to stop that cycle of violence. This bill, 1269, did several things in relationship to that current scheme. The first thing it did was a naming issue. The current law says domestic violence evaluation and treatment. The connotation there is that domestic violence is some sort of medical problem that the person is experiencing. That couldn't be further from the truth. So we renamed it to Domestic Violence Assessment and Intervention Program. That gets rid of that connotation, and it matches what's actually happening on the ground already. The next thing the law did was add several additional crimes of conviction that will trigger this mandatory requirement. So current law requires a judge to order it if the crime is simple assault, assault or aggravated assault, domestic violence, reckless endangerment, terrorizing or menacing, threatening someone. What our law now adds come August is harassment, stalking, felonious restraint and unlawful imprisonment, criminal mischief, which is destruction of property, interference with an emergency call, or violating a protection order, disorderly conduct, order prohibiting contact, or domestic violence protection order. So those are very similar offenses to the current ones, in which often those are the ultimate crimes of conviction that somebody is convicted of when they engage in interpersonal violence. We want to make sure we're capturing a wider group of potential criminal defendants who are convicted to make sure we're getting everybody into the programming who could benefit from it. And the last thing the law does is, under current law, it has no provisions for a recent former dating partner. So if that relationship ends, but the violence continues a week or two later, we're already out of the domestic violence realm under current law. So what we did in this bill, we learned in testimony from CVIC, sister agencies, that in reality, the programming really is targeted to intimate partner violence. It's not really tailored to sibling versus sibling, parent and adult child. So we narrowed the definition of if the victim is an intimate partner, which includes a former recent dating partner, then that's going to trigger the requirement that the court order this programming. And it does include a clause on the back end that if the person is assessed, the convicted person is assessed and it's determined they wouldn't benefit from the programming, or maybe that jurisdiction doesn't have it available, then the court can deem it satisfied. So these defendants aren't just hanging in limbo either, waiting for a program that doesn't exist for their particular circumstance.
Yeah. So can you also tell a little bit about what really the purpose for the bill and what led up to adding, sort of 9 additional offenses that would now make it a requirement?
Yeah, this was a really good example of CVIC and other sister agencies that are engaged in domestic violence protection, showing that initiative, coming forward with a bill proposal. And I'm so grateful they came to me with that idea. And they said, we've got some lived experience now that says this intervention programming is effective. It's catching a good swath of those that are engaging in this type of violence, but we're missing people. Either plea deals are bringing charges down, or the crime they're committing just isn't triggering this requirement. Can we expand this program that doesn't directly use new state dollars? So it was just a great example of CVIC and its partner agencies coming forward with that idea and engaging the legislative process proactively.
So you really brought heart and soul not only to this bill but others. But as you think about the impact that those 9 additional offenses will have, what are you excited about?
As we developed the testimony on this bill, as CVIC and others got me the research I needed to make the case for this bill, I learned that we have really good research showing the effectiveness of the current programming. A study that was done right here in Grand Forks showed that future contacts with law enforcement, future criminal charges, future orders of protection all decreased by almost 70 to 90% for people that participated in this program.
Those are data points that we use often, and we know it works. So, and one of the people helping to make that work is Taylor Sorensen and her team. But you actually were able to provide testimony at the session, and just curious what that experience was like for you.
It was a wonderful experience because I feel like it really shed some light on like the language and all of that, because there is kind of this misconception of what our services were for and what we do. So it was an honor to be able to share kind of how our process works and what our outcomes are hopeful to be.
Sometimes people think, oh, that's anger management training, but it's actually a proven model that we use. Can you explain what the model is and why the language around education is so important?
When we talk about domestic violence, kind of what you had mentioned earlier is it's not a disease. It's not something that someone can be diagnosed and then given, this many sessions or a pill to cure it. So when we talk about the language of evaluation and treatment, we're not treating people. We're providing a space to provide education that helps shift beliefs. So for our men's program, we use the Duluth curriculum that was based out of Duluth, Minnesota, that's based on survivors' experiences of living with individuals who cause harm to them. So we're not necessarily skill building and giving them tools to go home and try. We're talking about where do these beliefs come from that drive these behaviors, and how can we challenge those in this space while you're with us.
The bill also expands mandated program for additional crimes. Can you share the impact that this will have for both survivors of violence as well as those who use violence in their relationships?
With plea deals, we're sometimes seeing individuals get charged with, a crime that would mandate them having to do programming, but because it's pled down, that mandate's not in there. There's other crimes that society doesn't necessarily label as domestic violence because it's not physical. There's this belief that violence is only domestic violence if there's bruises or injuries, but there's a lot of behind the scene things that go on that we don't necessarily recognize that causes harm. So I think for survivors, we'll be able to address those that are using violence against them sooner. And for our participants, my hope would be that we see them sooner so we don't have to see them come through with, charges that have seriously harmed someone. So I think all around is going to benefit the people in our community that are experiencing violence, but also those that are using the violence.
I think it was, of the several hundred that went through our program, they were the parents and guardians of over 300 kiddos. So that also has close to my heart, because when we're helping mom and dad, we're helping those youngsters too. So what are your hopes and dreams as you think about this law?
Really educating individuals in our community that, seeking help doesn't have to be shameful. My hope, I always say when I talk to people, is that people seek out domestic violence intervention just like they'd seek out mental health or substance usage, because it's a resource that's available, but you have to take the steps to want to do it. So even though we'll have more charges that mandate individuals to come through programming, which a challenge with that could be, we might have longer wait lists, we might need to expand. My hope and dreams is just that individuals are willing to take the leap to dig deep to talk about themselves, because we want them to be better for themselves and for those around them.
Absolutely. Well, it'll be fun to follow this one. We appreciate both of you being here today.
Yeah.